sorry. Do you want me to use the microphone or not? Yes. I can't reach it.
Stand on the cage.
All right. There you go. All right. Can you hear me okay? I didn't realize I needed to ask for a step stool, but obviously the table high enough to see. I'm only going to have a couple of rabbits up here, and for the handout, things are going to change just a little bit because of rabbit availability. I have been raising rabbits since 1972, and I've written a lot of articles and a lot of stories and a lot of different things. About a year ago, I started to write an article about balance, and probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to write about because it can be so judgmental. In our standard, we have 18 breeds that in their general type description mention the word balance. 3 breeds that have an entire paragraph for balance. It's obviously very important. I really think that all 47 and 48, counting the lion heads, that balance is an important thing. They just didn't mention the word balance, but I think every single breed, an overall balanced rabbit is what you're seeking, is what you're desiring, is what your ultimate goal is, to have the overall balanced rabbit. Do I see overall balance the same as you, the same as every other judge? Not always. An easy way in this handout, as you'll read, to figure out balance, if you had 2 people on a teeter-totter, and they weighed exactly the same, and the teeter-totter stayed parallel to the ground, obviously they're in balance. Or a gymnast on a balance beam, or a basketball player spinning a basketball, it's going to balance on their finger. Obvious balance. There's no question it's obviously balanced. But now if we're going to take an animal of any species and decide if it's balanced or not, it can be a little more judgmental and in the eye of the beholder. For example, I found it very unique that of the 3 breeds in our standard that have a full paragraph on balance, the smallest breed in our standard, the Netherland Dwarf, and the largest breed, the Flemish Giant. If you read those descriptions, they're very similar. The description itself is extremely similar. However, you can't get 2 more different rabbits, especially with size. So how can a description be so similar written and the animals be so different? Well, because they need to balance per their standard and what each part of that animal is seeking. So obviously, a Netherland Dwarf, you want to look at the breeds, the head shape, the ear shape and size, and then the eyes. That's 35 points. I don't think he's used to hearing babies. And then you got 35 points on the body, to which is all great. But overall, you want an overall balanced animal. You want it to be harmonious. You want things to blend together. When you look at that animal, you want it. You don't want any single aspect of that animal to really, really, really stand out over another. You want everything to just kind of blend. So anyway, I have a couple of rabbits up here that I'm going to use, and they're Polish. Where'd that one go? Right there. Over here. Oh, there he is. Thank you. Thanks. All right, you guys see this? Look around here. Stay busy. All right, these are both junior bucks. So it's kind of nice to have the same similar age animals, and they develop differently. Every breed does. However, this chocolate one is a little out of balance. You can see his head is a little bit small. He's got good length of his ears, and they kind of balance with his body, but not quite with his head. His head's just a little bit small right now to balance with his body size. And do you all kind of agree with that? And sometimes it's hard until you put a really nicely balanced animal next to him. You got this black here, that also has a really nice body, a little more balanced head, where it just kind of blends in together. So if I was judging, and if I judged this chocolate, I might think, well, this is a pretty nice rabbit, and you get, obviously you do blacks first, but for the sake of this project, we're going to say we judge the chocolate one first. So I might give comments on this chocolate rabbit and say it's a really, really nice rabbit. Maybe if I don't judge Polish often, you think, well, it looks pretty nice, but then you pull out this black one and put it next to it and you think, wow, this one looks really nice because everything is so pleasing about it. Its head and ears and body, they fit well together, they blend well together. It looks like it all belongs together. To where now I look at the chocolate one and I think, wow, his head's a little bit small and his ears are a little bit long, but his body's a little bit big, so it's not quite as proportioned as the black. In the Netherland dwarfs, if anybody raises them or watches them or judges them, I have raised them since 1972, and I cannot tell you how many times a very huge-headed rabbit with short, round, thick ears, but a mediocre body, will win the class based on those points alone. It's very frustrating to exhibitors, it's frustrating to breeder judges. It's not the rabbit that really should ultimately win. In the handout you can see, and I think there's a little mathematical error if I'm not mistaken, but I gave a couple of scenarios. So if you took that huge-headed rabbit, Netherland dwarf, with the beautiful ears, beautiful head, it's got everything going from in front of the shoulders, but now just lacking in the body a little bit flat, a little bit pinched. And then you have a rabbit with a dwarf with a gorgeous body. We're going to give it all 35 points on the body, maybe a little narrow slope in the head, maybe a little thin as ears, but gorgeous, gorgeous body. Now I've got number 3 rabbit, where it's got a good head, but not as good as this massive-headed rabbit. A really good body, but maybe not quite as good as this beautiful-bodied animal. But adding up the points extremely similarly, that third rabbit should win. The third rabbit should beat the rabbit with the huge head because of its overall balance. And the Netherland Dwarf Club found it so important that they added an entire paragraph to their standard to emphasize that point, that an overall balanced rabbit should win over one with extremely strong features that's not quite as balanced. In the Flemish Giants, same thing. You want that rabbit to be overall balanced. In the judges that are in here, we've all judged the rabbits that have super big bone. They're super huge. You might have put it on the scale and it weighs the most in the class, and it's got great big bones, but it just doesn't balance. It's not pleasing to the eye. Should that rabbit win over a rabbit that might be a little bit smaller but certainly meets the criteria? No. The rabbit that's overall balanced should win the class. Another breed that extremely often I think gets misrepresented on balance is the English lop. I've heard many, many, many times that, wow, that English lop is amazing. Its ears are 26 inches long. It's the longest ears I've ever seen. It had to win the class. No, they don't win on ears. They win on overall balance. You want it to be harmonious. You want that English lop, the ears, the head, the body, everything about it to look like it fits. If you've got an English lop with ears they're huge and long, and if the ears balance within themselves, length and width-wise, and maybe have great substance, but the body is a little bit fine or the head's a little bit too small to fit on a rabbit, it's going to be out of balance. And that rabbit should not win over a rabbit that is a little more proportioned and that everything fits better. And in my handout, I had sent out some emails, and you guys can read them. We don't have to read them out loud, but just give some thoughts for some breeders about their own breed. You know, what in their mind they consider balance. And if anybody has any other thoughts on that, that would be awesome. I do have an English lop down here that we'll get out. It's a really nice balanced animal too. But I'm going to put one in the Polish one. Now see, if I was taller, I would feel more balanced, but
you're out of balance with the table.
I'm out of balance because I've gained too much weight this year.
You're out of balance with the table.
Right, out of balance with the table. All right, this is a beautiful English lot. There we go. All right. This rabbit, I think just everything about him is very well proportioned. His head, his ears, his body, just very nice harmony going all the way throughout. Could he stand a little bit longer ears? Probably. But if they were really, really long, then he would be out of proportion. So, but you know, you get into the condition and fur as well, and all of that fits in overall balance as well. So, hoping you guys have some questions. Any questions? No questions, are you kidding me? Yes?
So, in your estimation, the major feature for a breed isn't necessarily the focal point of the breed, it's the overall combination.
Yes. Yes. And I really think that in every breed that should be the case. It's not necessarily mentioned. The actual word balance might not be mentioned, but when you read their breed descriptions, you could, the way they describe them, they're describing a balanced animal. Again, only 18 breeds has the word in their general type, but if you read throughout the ones that don't, let's say Britannia Petite, I don't believe they have the word balance in their description. However, if you have Britannia Petite that is not balanced, it's going to look terrible. So it definitely needs to be balanced, even though the word's not there. An overall balanced animal that is nice and typey should win. Does that make sense? Yeah. Something a lot of us overlook and have for years, but I really think that the individual breed standards as well as the ARBA standards committee is something we're really looking into and really want to make a little more uniform and try to describe it better, but it's a really hard thing to describe. Yes?
I was just going to say that I think when they talk about the wow factor, have you heard of that?
The wow factor?
Yeah.
No?
No? Okay. Like when you look at a rabbit and you're like, that's a great rabbit, I think that's balance. You're seeing the balance.
The wow factor that I wasn't aware of, did you guys hear what she said? Everybody here? I think that can come into play. However, in some breeds, I'm trying to think of some breeds, that you could have a wow factor, but I often fall back to the English Angora.
English Angora with furnished ears.
Yes, and English Angora is a really good one to use, a big wow factor. And you get your hands on it, it might not be so balanced underneath of it. A lot of times with the nettled corpse, it's really easy to have the big wow head and ears. But what's behind that animal? It better have some bone, it better have some body, and it better not be pinched. And it needs some flesh and fur. It's got to have it all.
Sometimes breeders say that for breeds like Hollands, that the body should be 2 head lengths. Do you think that stays true for every rabbit, and that those kind of proportions exist in every breed?
Yes. Did you guys hear what she said?
Head should be 1/3 of the body.
Right. In the Hollands, some people say that the head should be 1/3 of the body, and yes. Again, the overall that pleasing feel you'll get when you see a nicely balanced animal. There is a Mike D'Amico has an amazing presentation, his woody animals. I don't know if he still does that ever, but if you haven't seen that, it's well worth seeing. I know some of the older judges, along with myself, we've all seen that, because it's an amazing presentation, and it really falls back on balance. He's got some animals and they're commercial types. And commercial type to me is a little bit easier to see and to measure, and you can even use forms of measurement in the commercial type animals because their depth and width must be equal, whether it's the shoulders, the midsection, or the hindquarters. Depth and width need to balance, need to equal. And he's got these rabbits that he puts, and they're made of wood, and he made specific faults in most of them except for one. And most of the time, your eye does not pick out the perfectly proportioned animal in those wooden rabbits, because it's very deceiving. You put a really, really deep one, isn't wide enough. I think that's the one in his presentation. So it's a really, really neat presentation. Many of us had asked if there's any way we can get replications of that, but I don't think anybody has. But I think that the commercial rabbits are a little bit easier, simply because as judging them, you can really use your hands as a measuring tool, and it's easy to figure out when the depth and the balance is equal to each other. But you're right, in the Hollands, you want to do that too. And the Nords, Hollands and Nords, very similar. Anything else?